Every courtroom has its rules. Speak only when spoken to, show no emotion, trust the evidence. But that morning, as cameras flashed and whispers filled the air, something broke those rules. A little girl, barely 9, sat trembling in the witness chair, clutching the leash of a German shepherd named Rex. Her voice was the key to a powerful man's downfall. And across the room, the defense lawyer, Mr. Crane, smiled the way only guilty men do, quietly, confidently, cruelly. Everything was prepared, every lie rehearsed, every weakness planned for, until that one moment, when innocence did something that cunning never saw coming. The girl unscrewed her water bottle, poured a little into the cap, and whispered softly, "You're thirsty too, aren't you?" The lawyer's smile vanished. His face turned pale, because that wasn't just water. It was proof. Proof that even the smallest act of kindness can reveal the darkest secret. Morning sunlight poured through the tall courthouse windows, spilling golden light across the marble floors. The echo of heels and hurried footsteps blended with the low murmur of reporters setting up cameras. Every sound seemed amplified, tense, as though the very air held its breath for what was about to happen. In that ocean of adult voices and courtroom chaos, a small figure moved quietly. A 9-year-old girl clutching a water bottle so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Ella. The youngest witness ever called in a corruption trial that had shaken the city. Her pigtails were slightly uneven, her shoes polished too neatly, as if someone had tried very hard to make her look brave. Beside her walked Rex, the German shepherd police dog, his black and tan coat gleaming under the morning light. His steps were silent, measured, every muscle alert, yet calm. To Ella, he wasn't just a dog. He was safety, warmth, and the only living being in the room who didn't look at her like she was fragile glass. A few steps behind, Officer Daniels followed, his expression steady but protective. He had been with Rex for 5 years. They'd tracked suspects through alleys, guarded high-risk trials, and rescued missing children. Yet this, somehow, felt different. He slowed his pace, lowering his voice. "Hey, kiddo," he said softly. "You doing okay?" Ella nodded quickly, but her lip trembled. "There are so many people," she whispered, glancing toward the crowd of reporters near the courtroom doors. Flashbulbs went off, bright bursts of light reflecting off the marble. Daniels knelt slightly, bringing his eyes to her level. "Don't worry about them," he said, calm but firm. "You just stay close to Rex. He's got you." The girl looked down at the big dog, who stared up at her with eyes as deep as polished amber. His tail gave a small thump against the floor. Something inside her loosened just a little. She reached out, resting her hand gently on his head. "He's really big," she said. Daniel smiled faintly. "Yeah, but he's just a big heart with paws." The moment hung between them, a soft, fragile calm before the storm of what was to come. Around them, the courthouse buzzed with tension. Lawyers hurried by, voices clipped and sharp. Reporters whispered names of politicians. Somewhere down the hall, a gavel struck wood, echoing like thunder. Ella took a shaky breath. Her small fingers traced the ridges of the water bottle label, pressing it against her chest like a charm. She could still hear her mother's voice from that morning. "Tell the truth, sweetheart. That's all you have to do." But what if her voice failed? What if they didn't believe her? Rex suddenly turned his head, as if sensing her spiraling thoughts. His gaze locked on hers, calm, unwavering. He didn't speak, of course, but something about his eyes said, I'm here. Don't be afraid. Daniels noticed the exchange. He'd seen Rex steady soldiers, calm children, but this was different. There was something sacred about the way the girl and the dog connected, wordlessly bridging fear with trust. When they reached the courtroom doors, a bailiff stopped them. "Witness escort?" Daniels nodded, showing his badge. "Officer Daniels, K9 unit. This is witness Ella Thompson." The bailiff glanced down at the girl, then at the dog. "Red Buffalo pitch first." "Good luck in there," he said quietly. As the heavy doors opened, a wave of whispers filled the room. Journalists scribbled in notebooks, cameras adjusted. On the other side sat rows of suited men, defense attorneys, observers, and one man who didn't look up at all. Mr. Crane, the defense lawyer. His eyes remained fixed on his papers, his jaw tight, his expression unreadable. Daniels guided Ella to the witness area, seating her carefully beside Rex. He stayed near, giving her a reassuring nod. The judge wasn't in yet, but the room already felt suffocating, too large, too bright, too full of eyes that wanted something from her. Ella's throat felt dry. She unscrewed her water bottle, took a tiny sip, then looked down at Rex. "You want some?" she whispered. Rex blinked, his ears twitching, tilting his head slightly, as if saying, "I'm okay." She smiled, the first small smile of the morning. "You're my brave boy," she murmured. In that instant, Daniels caught it. A flicker of tenderness that cut through all the courtroom tension. Cameras flashed again as the judge entered. Everyone rose. Ella startled, dropping her bottle. Daniels quickly reached down, handing it back to her. Their fingers brushed briefly, hers small and trembling, his steady and warm. "You're doing great," he whispered. She nodded, blinking back tears. "I just don't want to say the wrong thing." "There's no wrong thing," Daniels said gently. "Just tell them what happened. And if you get scared, look at Rex." Her eyes followed his, landing on the big shepherd now lying at her feet, head resting on his paws. Even in this solemn, echoing chamber, Rex looked peaceful, like he trusted her as much as she trusted him. The judge began reading the case summary. Words like embezzlement, witness tampering, political interference floated through the air, too heavy for a child to grasp. But she didn't need to understand all of it. She just needed to remember what she saw and believe that the truth mattered. Somewhere behind the defense table, Mr. Crane finally looked up. His eyes narrowed slightly when he saw the child sitting beside a police dog. His expression shifted. Curiosity, irritation, or maybe calculation. Daniels noticed. So did Rex. The dog's ears twitched once more, his gaze locking briefly on Crane before returning to Ella. A low, nearly inaudible rumble came from his throat. Not a growl, but something ancient, instinctive. Ella felt it through the floor. A vibration that made her look down. She reached for Rex's ear, stroking it softly. "It's okay," she whispered. "We're okay." And just like that, the rumble stopped. The air seemed to ease again. The judge's gavel struck once. "Court is now in session." Daniels exhaled, stepping back into position near the witness bench. For a brief moment, the sunlight caught on Rex's eyes, and it was as if the whole courtroom paused to notice. A child and a dog, side by side. in a world too complicated for either of them, but bound by something simple, something unbreakable. Ella leaned closer, whispering words only Rex could hear. "I'm scared," she said softly. Rex shifted, pressing his head gently against her knee. Steady, loyal, wordless. And in that touch, her trembling stopped. The soft hum of conversation filled the defense chamber, a private, windowless room behind the courtroom. The air smelled faintly of stale coffee and polished leather. Papers were stacked in neat, perfect piles on a long mahogany table. Everything about the space screamed control, precision, manipulation. Mr. Crane sat at the head of the table, his posture flawless, his suit impeccable. He was the kind of man who seemed carved from ice, sharp lines, cold eyes, and a voice that never needed to rise to command obedience. His fingers tapped lightly against a manila folder marked "Confidential." On the wall above him, the faint hum of a vent was the only sound brave enough to exist without permission. He watched the muted screen of a courthouse monitor. On it, the image of a little girl appeared, Ella, clutching her water bottle beside the hulking German shepherd. The camera caught the way she looked at the dog, the way the animal leaned protectively toward her. Crane's jaw flexed. "Pathetic," he muttered. "They think pity wins juries now." Across the table, his assistant, a nervous man named Wells, with slicked hair and sweat on his brow, fidgeted with his pen. "She's the key witness, sir. If she's credible—" Crane's glare silenced him instantly. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling through his nose. "If she's credible," he repeated venomously. "Then the senator's finished. My client goes down. The entire case unravels. Do you understand what's at stake here, Wells?" The assistant swallowed hard. I do, sir." Crane's voice dropped to a whisper, as dangerous as a blade. "Good. Then stop thinking like a schoolboy and start thinking like a strategist." He stood and moved toward the one-way glass overlooking the hallway. The faint reflection of his own face overlapped the image of Ella walking past with Officer Daniels and Rex. Her small hands clutched that bottle again. Transparent plastic, blue cap, half full. Such an innocent thing. Crane's eyes narrowed. She testifies. We lose everything. But if she hesitates, if she falters, if she forgets just enough. He turned slowly toward Wells. The story changes. Wells blinked. "You mean, Crane interrupted. "No one listens to a trembling child. If her memory slips, the prosecution collapses. All we need is confusion. Nothing violent. Nothing that leaves a mark." He walked back to the table, opened a drawer, and pulled out a small silver vial. He unscrewed the cap. Inside, a clear liquid shimmered faintly. He held it up to the fluorescent light, his reflection bending inside it like a distorted truth. "Harmless in small doses," he said softly. "Harmless, but effective. Induces light disorientation, short-term memory fog. Just enough for her to question herself." Wells stared, pale. "Sir, that's dangerous. It could—" Crane's gaze froze him. "It could ensure justice stays in the right hands." He screwed the cap back on, then handed the vial to Wells. "You'll handle it." Wells hesitated, fingers trembling. "How?" Crane's tone was calm, almost bored. "Her bag is kept in the side hall before they enter the courtroom. You'll switch her bottle with this one." He opened a leather case on the table. Inside lay an identical water bottle. Time to serve 400 mountainmos. Same brand, same size, same blue cap. It looked utterly ordinary. He placed it beside the vial. A single drop. That's all it takes. For a moment, neither man spoke. The hum of the vent seemed to grow louder. Wells looked down at the bottle, then back at his superior. And the dog? He's with her the whole time. Crane smiled faintly, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The dog drinks when she drinks. They've bonded. If anything, it makes the story more believable when she loses focus. People will assume stress. The perfect illusion. He leaned closer, breath steady, eyes ice cold. You have 10 minutes before recess. Make it happen. Wells nodded shakily and left the room. The door clicked shut behind him. For a moment, Crane stood perfectly still. Then he adjusted his tie, straightened his cuffs, and exhaled. On the monitor, Ella reached down to pet Rex again. The dog's tail wagged once, brushing against her shoe. Crane's eyes followed the gesture. Something about that animal unsettled him. The way it seemed to see him, even through the screen. Irrational, of course, but still, his chest tightened slightly. It's just a dog, he muttered. Then he turned away. Across the hall, Wells walked briskly toward the security corridor, heart pounding. The courthouse seemed to stretch endlessly, every footstep echoing like a warning. He could feel the vial in his pocket, its weight heavier than metal. He passed two officers chatting near a doorway and forced a smile. "Morning," he said. One of them nodded, barely glancing his way. Wells slipped into the witness prep room. There, on a low bench, sat a small pink backpack. Ella's. A drawing of a sunflower poked out from the side pocket, edges crumpled. He froze, staring at it, the childlike innocence hitting him like a punch to the gut. "Just do it," he whispered. He pulled out the fake bottle, poured a few drops of the liquid, then quickly swapped it with hers. His hands trembled so badly that the cap almost slipped. A voice came from behind him. "You lost?" Wells nearly jumped. A bailiff stood in the doorway, holding a clipboard. "Oh, no, sir," Wells stammered. "Just making sure everything's ready for the defense." The bailiff nodded slowly. "Make it quick. They're calling witnesses soon." Wells forced a grin, shoved the backpack's zipper closed, and hurried out, heart hammering. Back in the defense chamber, Crane checked his watch. 5 minutes had passed. He turned again to the screen. Ella and the officer were now entering the courtroom. The switch had been made. The girl still clutched the bottle. He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands, his reflection glinting in the glass behind him. "And just like that," he murmured, "the truth bends." His assistant returned, pale and sweating. "It's done." Crane didn't look at him. "Good." For a long moment, silence settled between them. The only sound was the ticking of the old wall clock, slow, deliberate, like a heartbeat in the dark. Crane turned once more toward the glass. He watched as the girl took her seat beside the German shepherd, unaware that her fate had already been rewritten. A small, satisfied smile curved his lips. "She won't remember a thing," he whispered. And for the first time that morning, the air in the room felt colder. The courtroom was full to the edges, rows of reporters hunched over notepads, cameras glinting like watchful eyes, and murmurs rising and falling like waves before a storm. Every chair creaked under the weight of tension. The judge's bench loomed high above, carved from dark oak, and the American flag stood unmoving behind him, an emblem of order in a room trembling with chaos. Ella sat at the witness stand, dwarfed by the microphone that rose in front of her. Her small hands gripped its edge so tightly the knuckles turned pale. Rex, the German shepherd, rested by her side, his body still, but his eyes sharp, following every motion in the room. Beside him, Officer Daniels stood watch, part guardian, part anchor, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression composed but heavy with concern. The judge, a tall man with silver hair and a furrowed brow, entered the chamber. The bailiff's voice rang out, "All rise!" Everyone stood. The gavel struck once, an echo that sliced through the noise. Court is now in session. As the crowd settled, Mr. Crane, the defense lawyer, rose from his table. His every motion was deliberate, smooth, and disarmingly polite. "Your Honor," he began, his voice controlled and warm, "the defense wishes only to clarify a few points with the witness. Nothing more." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Crane adjusted his tie and turned toward the little girl. For a moment, his face softened into something that resembled kindness, but his eyes, sharp and deliberate, betrayed calculation. He stepped closer, his voice low and coaxing. "Good morning, Ella. You remember me, don't you? We met, before, when I asked you some questions." Ella nodded. "Yes, sir." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Good," Crane said. "And you remember why you're here today?" She looked briefly toward the prosecutor's table, then at Daniels, who gave her a quiet, reassuring nod. "To tell the truth," she said. The room went still for a moment. Crane smiled faintly. "Of course. The truth. Now, Ella, you said before that you saw a man in a dark coat near your mother's office the night before the police came, correct?" "Yes." "And you're sure it was Mr. Hale, the man sitting here?" He gestured to the accused, who sat stone-faced a few feet away. Ella hesitated. I think so." "You think so?" Crane repeated gently. "Not that you're certain?" Her small shoulders lifted and fell. He looked like him. A whisper of triumph flickered in Crane's eyes. He took another step closer. "That's perfectly fine, sweetheart. It's hard to remember faces sometimes, isn't it? Especially when it's dark." Ella bit her lip. It wasn't dark. The hallway light was on. Crane paused, but only for a heartbeat. Of course it was. But lights can make shadows, and sometimes shadows play tricks on our eyes. Do you remember how scared you were that night?" She nodded, the memory stirring tears that glistened in her lashes. "I was scared." The lawyer leaned closer, softening his tone even further. "That's right. You were frightened. It's easy for a frightened mind to see what it expects to see." He let the words hang, heavy and poisoned. Maybe it wasn't Mr. Hale after all. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Daniels felt his jaw tighten, but he said nothing. Rex shifted, slightly, his tail twitching once against the floor. The prosecutor rose to object, but the judge motioned for restraint. "Continue, Mr. Crane, but be careful." Crane gave a respectful nod and turned back to the witness. "Ella, you brought your dog today, didn't you? Rex, is it?" She looked down at the shepherd. Yes, he's a brave dog, Crane said, his voice slick with false warmth. He keeps you safe, doesn't he? Yes. And when you're scared, he helps you feel brave again. Yes. Crane smiled faintly. Then perhaps you were brave that night because Rex was with you in spirit. Sometimes, when we want to be strong, we make ourselves believe things, don't we? So we can feel less afraid. The room fell utterly silent. Every word dripped like oil onto still water. Daniels could see what Crane was doing, planting seeds of doubt, twisting her innocence into uncertainty. Ella blinked, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. She looked at the judge, then at Daniels, searching for an anchor. I remember what I saw, she whispered. But her voice shook. Crane tilted his head. Of course you do, he said gently. You remember trying to be brave. That's admirable. He leaned forward slightly, lowering his tone as if sharing a secret. But memories can be tricky things, can't they? That's when Rex moved. Subtle, quiet, but unmistakable. The shepherd shifted his weight, his paw reaching out to rest lightly on Ella's shoe. The soft pad of his paw pressed against her foot, grounding her, solid, real, present. Ella froze. She looked down. The world seemed to slow. The courtroom's noises faded into a distant hum. All she could see was the deep brown of Rex's eyes, unwavering and full of quiet strength. Something inside her steadied. When she spoke again, her voice carried new firmness. I know what I saw, she said. He was there. I saw his face. Crane blinked, thrown for just a second by the change in her tone. You're certain? Yes, sir, she said clearly this time. He dropped something when he ran. It had his name. The courtroom stirred. Even the judge leaned forward slightly. Daniels exhaled quietly, a ghost of a smile tugging at his mouth. Crane straightened, his charm cracking just a little. Your Honor, Let her finish, the judge interrupted. Ella swallowed hard, her small hands still resting near the microphone. He dropped his watch, she said, voice trembling but sure. It had his name, Hale. Crane's jaw tightened. A flicker of panic crossed his eyes before he masked it. He turned away for a moment, composing himself. Rex still sat beside the witness stand, eyes half-lidded but alert, his paw unmoving on her shoe, her living anchor amid the storm. When Crane faced the judge again, his tone was smoother but colder. The witness is emotional, Your Honor. Perhaps we should allow her a recess. But the judge's expression had shifted, and his gavel tapped lightly once. Denied. The witness is composed. Crane's teeth ground together, barely audible. Daniels's chest swelled with quiet pride as he watched from his post. He didn't need to move, didn't need to speak. Rex had done everything, calmer than any human, braver than most. And in that still, trembling space between question and answer, a bond was visible to all. A girl's fragile courage and a dog's steady heart standing taller than any argument. Crane's gaze flicked, briefly toward Rex, something darker hiding behind the lawyer's calm mask. A silent thought, cold and calculating. This isn't over. The gavel struck again. Witness may step down. As the courtroom rustled to life, Ella finally exhaled, her hand slipping to stroke Rex's ear. "You're my hero," she whispered. The dog's tail thumped once in reply, and behind them, in the shadowed corner of the defense table, Mr. Crane's eyes narrowed, already calculating his next move. The gavel struck once, echoing like a sigh through the vast courtroom. 15-minute recess, the judge declared. Chairs scraped, papers shuffled, and the thick air of tension began to dissolve, only slightly. Reporters whispered into microphones, defense assistants hurried to corners to whisper strategy, and officers stretched stiff shoulders, shaking off the intensity of the last hour. Ella sat frozen in her seat for a moment, her small frame dwarfed by the wooden stand. The spotlight of adult eyes had finally shifted away, but her heart was still pounding hard enough to make her vision tremble. She rubbed her palms on her skirt, trying to stop them from shaking. At her feet, Rex lifted his head, his dark eyes calm and steady. The dog's tail brushed softly against the floor, a slow rhythm that seemed to pull her back from the edge of panic. Officer Daniels approached quietly, his boots clicking softly on the tile. He crouched beside her, voice low. "You did good, kiddo. Real good." Ella tried to smile, but her lips wobbled. I forgot some things." "Doesn't matter," Daniel said gently. "You told the truth. That's what counts." Her throat felt dry, painfully so. She reached for her small pink backpack and pulled out her water bottle. The cap squeaked as she twisted it open, a sound strangely loud in the half-empty room. She lifted it to her lips and took a small sip, the cool water sliding down her throat, easing the tremor in her chest. Rex shifted beside her, licking his lips once. She looked down at him and smiled faintly through the fog of exhaustion. "You're thirsty too," she whispered. She poured a small amount of water into the cap and placed it carefully on the floor. Rex sniffed it once, then began to drink, slow, deliberate, the quiet lapping sound echoing softly in the space between heartbeats. His tail wagged twice, a lazy sweep against the marble floor. The moment was tender, human, pure, the kind of thing that could have melted even the hardest soul. But across the courtroom, Mr. Crane froze. From behind the defense table, he had been pretending to shuffle papers, feigning casual conversation with his assistant. But the moment his eyes caught the glint of the bottle in Ella's hands, the blue cap, the clear plastic, the exact brand, his heart skipped. He stopped breathing. Rex drank again, tongue catching the edge of the cap, unaware. Crane's face paled. A subtle but unmistakable panic flickered in his eyes. His hand clenched around his pen until it snapped, ink bleeding across his palm. "Sir?" his assistant whispered. "What's wrong?" Crane didn't answer. His gaze was locked on the dog. The dog drank it. His mind raced. It was only a drop. Just enough to cloud her memory. Not enough to harm. But that animal. He couldn't calculate fast enough. The precision that had defined his career began to falter. He felt a prickle of sweat under his collar. At the far end of the room, Daniels noticed. He wasn't watching Ella anymore. He was watching Crane. Years of training had taught him to read faces, to catch the invisible ripple of guilt that runs through a man who knows he's been seen. Crane's eyes darted briefly toward the bottle, then away. Too fast. His hand trembled as he wiped the ink from his fingers with a handkerchief. Daniels's instincts flared. Something was wrong. He looked back at Ella. She had capped the bottle again, humming softly under her breath, the way children do when they think the world has quieted. Rex sat beside her now, tail wagging faintly, tongue brushing his muzzle. Perfectly normal, perfectly calm. But Daniels couldn't shake the feeling. The way Crane had blanched wasn't normal. It wasn't nerves. It was fear. He rose slowly, his hand resting on the edge of the bench as he approached Ella. "Hey," he said softly. "You okay?" She nodded. "Just tired. Rex is thirsty." Daniel smiled, but his eyes flicked to the bottle. "Mind if I hang on to that for a bit?" Ella blinked, confused. "It's just water." "I know," Daniel said easily, crouching to her level. "I'll grab you a fresh one from the officer's cooler, okay? Just let me keep this one safe." He extended his hand. There was no urgency, just gentle authority. Ella hesitated, then handed it to him. As the bottle passed between them, the sunlight streaming through the tall windows hit the liquid inside, refracting into a bright shimmer across the floor. For a moment, it looked beautiful, harmless. Daniels capped it tight and slipped it into his jacket pocket, his instincts thrumming like an electric current beneath his skin. From across the room, Crane noticed. Their eyes met, just for a second. That second stretched like a wire pulled too tight. Crane blinked first, tearing his gaze away, muttering something to his assistant. Daniels's jaw set. There it was. The flicker of confirmation. The kind of fear that only comes when someone's secret teeters on exposure. The courtroom clock ticked. Outside, muffled cities. Noise seeped faintly through old windows. Horns, sirens, distant life. But inside, time itself seemed to hold still. Ella reached down to pet Rex, running her small hand along the ridge of his back. The dog leaned into the touch, pressing his head into her knee. She smiled again, thinking the storm had passed, thinking this was just another break before the next round of questions. Daniels stood near the exit, his mind spinning through possibilities. He'd seen too many poisoned drinks in interrogation rooms, too many accidents that were anything but. But here? In a courthouse? It didn't fit. Unless someone was desperate enough. The recess bell rang. A sharp, metallic clang that startled Ella. She jumped slightly, the cap from her empty water bottle rolling from her lap and spinning across the floor. It turned, round and round, the sound delicate but piercing in the heavy silence. Rex watched it spin, his eyes following until it slowed, wobbled, and finally stopped near the defense table. Crane stared at it, the tiny blue cap lying at his feet. His fingers twitched, his face rigid. For a heartbeat, he looked less like a lawyer and more like a trapped animal. Daniels saw it too. He didn't move, but his gaze hardened. The energy in the room shifted. A warmth had vanished, replaced by something colder, something taut and invisible, stretching between them all. Ella looked up at Daniels, sensing the change, though she didn't understand it. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked quietly. He shook his head, forcing a small smile. "No, sweetheart. You did everything right." She reached for Rex's leash as they stood to leave. The dog's ears twitched once, his eyes flicking briefly toward Crane before he turned back to follow the girl. Daniels waited until they'd stepped into the hallway before glancing back one last time. Crane sat perfectly still, staring at his ink-stained hands. And on the marble floor beside his chair, The blue bottle cap glimmered faintly in the sunlight, silent, damning, and impossibly small. The second recess ended with the scrape of chairs and a murmur that filled every corner of the courtroom. The air had changed. Something invisible yet undeniable hung within it, as though the walls themselves sensed what was coming. Mr. Crane adjusted his tie, though his fingers trembled faintly. The small blue cap was gone from the floor. Someone must have picked it up during cleanup. But the sight of the dog drinking, the flash of pink tongue, the shimmer of water, kept replaying in his mind. A cold sweat gathered at his collar. He leaned toward his assistant, voice a low hiss meant only for him. "He drank it," Crane whispered. The assistant blinked. "Sir?" "The dog," Crane rasped, his face tightening. "He drank it." The sedative, the words stopped there. Crane forced himself to sit straighter, smoothing the tremor from his hands. Calm, composure, is survival. Across the room, Officer Daniels was talking quietly with another officer near the witness bench. His expression was measured, but his eyes were scanning. Every movement, every glance, every breath from the defense table. Something wasn't right. His instincts screamed it. Behind him, Ella sat on the bench, Rex at her feet. The dog's steady breathing had always been her comfort, a rhythm she could lean on. But now, something in that rhythm changed. A faint panting sound. Then, a soft whine. Ella frowned and looked down. "Rex?" The German shepherd shifted uneasily, his head lifting slightly, tongue lolling as if the air had suddenly turned too thick. His ears twitched, confusion flickered in his eyes. "Bitch. First." "Rex?" she whispered again, her hand reaching for him. Daniels turned instantly, the moment he saw Rex's posture. Head low, eyes glassy, breathing uneven, his chest clenched. He was beside them in 3 strides. "What's wrong, boy?" Rex blinked, unsteady. He wasn't collapsing, but he was off, something subtle and terrifyingly wrong. Daniels looked at Ella. "Did he eat something?" She shook her head, panic rising. "No, he just drank some of my water." Daniels froze. His heart seemed to stop for a second. "Your water?" She nodded, confused by his tone. "From my bottle, during the break." And that was it. The missing piece, the reason Crane's face had blanched. The gnawing instinct that hadn't let Daniels breathe since recess. His hand darted to his pocket. The bottle. The one he'd taken from Ella. It was still there, capped tight, the faintest film of condensation glistening on its side. He turned sharply toward the bailiff. "Get a forensic officer here, now." The command cracked through the air like a gunshot. The murmurs stopped. Reporters froze mid-note. Even the judge looked up, startled. "What's happening, officer?" the judge demanded. Daniels didn't answer. He was already pulling the bottle from his jacket, holding it up to the light. The clear liquid inside looked ordinary, utterly, impossibly ordinary. "Sir," Daniels said tightly, "I believe the witness's water may be contaminated." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. The prosecutor stood abruptly. "Contaminated? What do you mean?" Daniels didn't respond. He knelt beside Rex, hand firm on the dog's shoulder. "Hang on, buddy," he murmured. "Just breathe." The German shepherd's panting slowed slightly, though confusion still clouded his eyes. Crane's assistant shot him a look, panic barely contained. Crane leaned forward, whispering through clenched teeth. "Don't move. Don't say a word." His pulse pounded at his temples. If the bottle was tested, everything was finished. The forensic officer, a woman in a gray lab coat, entered moments later, carrying a small field kit. Daniels handed her the bottle without hesitation. "Quick test," he said. "Check for any foreign compounds." The judge gestured sharply. "Proceed. Everyone else, remain silent." The room fell into a suffocating quiet. The forensic officer swirled the liquid gently, then dipped a reagent strip into the bottle. Seconds stretched like hours. The strip began to darken, slowly, unmistakably, shifting from pale yellow to deep violet. A sharp intake of breath came from the front row. The officer looked up, her face grave. "Positive for a sedative agent." The words landed like thunder. For a moment, no one spoke. The shock was total, the kind that ripples outward, slow and unstoppable. The judge rose to his feet, eyes flashing with disbelief. "Are you certain?" "Yes, Your Honor," the forensic officer replied. "The compound appears to be a mild anesthetic, similar to what's used for short-term disorientation. It's not lethal, but it could severely impair memory or focus." A chorus of gasps spread through the spectators. Journalists scrambled for notebooks. Camera flashes erupted like lightning. Ella's eyes widened, her face draining of color. "Sedative?" Her voice cracked. I gave Rex the water." Daniels turned quickly. "Hey, look at me," he said, crouching to her level. "It's okay. He's gonna be fine. It wasn't your fault, sweetheart. You hear me? Not your fault." Tears welled in her eyes, spilling before she could stop them. "I hurt him," she whispered. "I hurt him." Rex lifted his head weakly, pressing his nose against her arm. The simple act broke whatever composure she had left. She buried her face into his fur, sobbing quietly. Daniels swallowed hard. His own hands were shaking now, the adrenaline crashing into him like a wave. He looked up at the judge. "We need medical attention for the dog immediately, and I'd advise securing the defense table for investigation." The judge's face darkened. "Do it." Two officers moved swiftly toward Crane's table. The lawyer stood, mask of calm cracking. "This is absurd," he snapped. "You can't just—" The judge's voice boomed. "Sit down, counselor." Crane hesitated, jaw tight, knuckles white against the table edge. The forensic officer handed Daniels the printout. The evidence was irrefutable. Daniels stared at the chemical markers. Propazine, a short-acting sedative, the kind used in psychological manipulation cases. He exhaled slowly, thoughts sharpening into cold, hard clarity. This wasn't an accident. It was sabotage. Crane's assistant leaned toward him, whispering frantically, "What do we do?" Crane didn't answer. His eyes darted toward Ella, toward the bottle now sealed inside a forensic bag. "Impossible." But Daniels saw it. The flash of recognition. The guilt in his eyes. The judge's gavel struck once, silencing the chaos. "This court will recess until further notice," he announced. "All evidence is to be secured. No one leaves this room without permission." Daniels knelt beside Ella again. She was trembling, her small hand still resting on Rex's head. "He's gonna be okay," he whispered. "Dogs like him. They're tougher than they look." Her tears fell onto Rex's fur. "He saved me," she said, voice breaking. Daniels looked at the bottle sealed into evidence, then at Crane's pale face. "Yeah," he said quietly. He did. The courtroom was silent now, save for the faint click of cameras and the soft whimper of a child clinging to her protector, the one who had, once again, taken the danger meant for her. The courtroom was no longer a place of order. It had become a storm. Reporters whispered furiously, cameras flickered, and the air felt charged with something raw and dangerous. The gavel struck over and over, trying to restore calm, but the echoes only added to the chaos. Mr. Crane stood at the defense table, his face slick with sweat, his composure unraveling in thin, desperate threads. He had spent years mastering the art of control. His tone, his posture, his timing. But now those same rehearsed gestures betrayed him. His hand trembled as he reached for a glass of water that wasn't there. This is a misunderstanding," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "Someone must have tampered with the evidence." The judge, his expression stone, leaned forward. "Are you suggesting the police tampered with evidence in my courtroom, Mr. Crane?" Crane forced a brittle laugh. "I'm suggesting, Your Honor, that accidents happen. That child's water could have been contaminated elsewhere. We cannot jump to conclusions." Officer Daniels stepped forward, the quiet authority in his stride silencing the room faster than the gavel ever could. "Enough!" Crane turned sharply, face twitching. "Officer, this is not your place." "It's exactly my place," Daniels said. His voice was low but steady, the kind of tone that cuts through lies like a blade through silk. "You've been nervous since recess. You watched that bottle like it was ticking down to zero, and when the dog drank from it, your face went white." "That's ridiculous," Crane snapped too fast. "I was concerned. I thought the animal—" Daniels took another step closer. "Concerned or afraid?" Crane's jaw tightened. "You're making baseless accusations." "Then explain this," Daniels said, nodding to the forensic officer near the evidence table. She held up a sealed bag. Inside, the water bottle glittered under the fluorescent lights. That bottle was in the witness's possession from the start of the trial. No one else touched it except the child and your assistant. The judge turned sharply. "Can this be confirmed?" "Yes, Your Honor," the forensic officer said. "Security has been reviewing the camera feed." A courtroom technician wheeled in a monitor, the screen flickering to life. The footage began, the grainy timestamp showing the courthouse corridor during the recess. People moved in and out of frame, officers, clerks, lawyers, the ordinary rhythm of a courtroom break. Then came the image that changed everything. Wells, Crane's assistant, entering the small witness preparation room. He looked around nervously, glanced over his shoulder, then crouched beside a pink backpack. Ella's. The room went utterly still. On the screen, Wells pulled out a water bottle, unscrewed the cap, and swapped it with another identical one from his coat pocket. The movement was fast, practiced, the kind of gesture someone rehearses. The clip ended with Wells leaving the room, smoothing his tie, a faint sheen of sweat visible beneath the light. Gasps rippled through the spectators. Reporters scribbled wildly. Someone whispered, "Oh my God!" Crane's face drained of color. That's taken out of context," he stammered. "My assistant. He must have... He wasn't authorized." "Enough!" the judge thundered. "Do not insult this court with half-truths, counselor." Wells sat frozen, his face gray, eyes darting between Crane and the door, as if searching for escape. "He made me do it," he whispered, voice shaking. "He said it would just make her forget things. Just a drop." Crane spun toward him, fury igniting behind his polished mask. "You idiot! Stop talking!" But it was too late. The truth had already spilled into the open, like broken glass. Daniels stepped forward, eyes locked on Crane. "You risked a child's life. You tampered with evidence in a federal trial, all because you were afraid of what she'd say." The silence that followed was deafening. The judge's hand tightened around his gavel. "Mr. Crane," he said, each word measured and cold, "you are under arrest for obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, and endangerment of a minor. Officers." Before he could finish, Crane turned, panic flashing across his features. But two bailiffs were already moving. One gripped his arm, the other his shoulder. "You don't understand," Crane shouted. "This wasn't supposed to happen. It's politics. Everyone's corrupt." The gavel struck again, louder this time. "Remove him from this courtroom." Daniels nodded. He knelt beside Ella, resting a hand on her shoulder. "Come on, sweetheart," he said quietly. "He needs you close." She looked up, eyes red, voice trembling. "He saved me again." Daniels smiled faintly. "Yeah," he said softly. "He's good at that." He glanced once more toward the door where Crane had been taken away. The echoes of the man's protests still lingered faintly, but they meant nothing now. The truth had already chosen its side. Rex shifted, resting his head on Ella's lap. The gavel struck one final time, not in anger, but in closure. The sound reverberated like the ending of a storm. And in that moment, amid tears, relief, and the hum of justice restored, one truth shone brighter than all the rest. Sometimes, the purest testimony doesn't come from words, but from loyalty that never wavers, even in silence. Night had fallen by the time they reached the police veterinary wing. The hallways were quiet, too quiet, lit only by the hum of fluorescent lights that painted everything in pale blue. The buzz of electricity mixed with the faint rhythm of breathing machines from the nearby rooms. Rex lay on a steel examination table beneath one of those lights. His fur glistened dully where IV lines and monitoring pads had been placed. The steady beep of a heart monitor filled the silence, soft and rhythmic, a fragile reminder that he was still here. Officer Daniels stood beside him, hands on the edge of the table, head bowed. His uniform jacket hung open, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up. He hadn't moved in hours. His fingers brushed the shepherd's paw, cold, motionless, yet alive. "You shouldn't have drunk that," Daniels whispered, voice raw. "That wasn't your job. You were supposed to stay safe. I was supposed to protect you." Rex didn't stir. His breathing was shallow, slow, steady, the drug still working its way through his blood. The veterinarian, a middle-aged woman in scrubs, adjusted the drip and checked the monitor. Her tone was calm but careful. "His vitals are stable," she said softly. "The sedative concentration is dropping. He's fighting it." Daniels nodded faintly, though his jaw clenched. "He's been fighting his whole life." The vet placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Then he knows how to win this one, too." But Daniels didn't answer. His gaze stayed fixed on the dog. The same partner who had chased armed suspects through alleyways, tracked lost hikers for miles, stood firm in gunfire without flinching. Seeing him like this, still, fragile, powerless, cut deeper than any bullet ever could. The door creaked open behind him. Ella stood there, holding her mother's hand. Her small frame seemed even smaller under the sterile lights. In her other arm, she carried something wrapped in pink. A blanket, soft and handmade, unevenly stitched, but full of love. Her mother knelt beside her, whispering, "Remember what you said you wanted to do?" Ella nodded. She took a shaky breath and walked slowly toward the table. Daniels turned when he heard her footsteps. His expression softened instantly, but the sadness in his eyes didn't fade. "Hey, kiddo," he said quietly. "He's strong. He's gonna pull through." Ella's lip trembled. "He looks tired." "He's just resting." Daniels knelt beside her. "He worked real hard today." She nodded, clutching the blanket tighter. Then, standing on tiptoe, she reached up and spread it carefully over Rex's body. The edges draped unevenly over his legs, the fabric covered in small patches of embroidery. Paw prints, hearts, and near the corner, a crookedly stitched word, "Hero." Her small hands smoothed it gently across his chest. "It's warm," she whispered. "I made it for him, in case he ever got cold." Daniels swallowed hard, throat burning. He turned away, pretending to study the monitor so she wouldn't see his eyes. Rex's ear twitched faintly under the blanket. It was barely perceptible, but Ella noticed. "See?" she said quickly, voice breaking. "He moved. He knows I'm here." So she did. For the next few minutes, the sterile room became something else entirely. Ella spoke in a trembling, earnest voice. About school, about the drawing she made of him catching the bad guy, about how she didn't like the way everyone looked scared in court except him. Daniels listened, motionless. Each word landed heavier than the last. "I was really scared," Ella said finally, voice cracking. "But then you looked at me, Rex, and I wasn't scared anymore." She leaned forward, pressing her forehead against his fur. "You're my best friend." That broke him. Daniels turned away, hand covering his mouth, shoulders shaking. The sound of quiet sobbing, muffled, restrained, filled the space. Her mother stepped forward but stopped herself. This wasn't a moment to interrupt. Rex's chest rose, slow but steady. His body remained still, but his tail shifted once beneath the blanket. A faint movement, almost invisible, but enough to make Ella gasp softly. "See?" she said again, tears spilling freely. "He heard me!" Daniels exhaled shakily, forcing a smile. "He hears you, all right. Probably thinking you talk more than the rest of us put together." That made her giggle through her tears, a small, watery sound that somehow felt sacred in the middle of all this grief. The vet adjusted the monitor again, studying the readings. "His body's responding," she said quietly. "The sedative's almost gone, but he's exhausted. He'll need rest, fluids, and time. He's lucky you brought him in when you did." Daniels finally allowed himself to breathe, chest loosening for the first time in hours. "You hear that, partner?" he murmured, patting Rex's side. "Even science says you're too stubborn to quit." Minutes passed. The room dimmed as one overhead light flickered off. Daniels stood silently, arms folded, watching the two of them. A little girl and a wounded hero bound by something purer than duty or words. He finally spoke, voice low and steady, as if confessing to the room itself. "He's the best partner I ever had," he said. "And he never once hesitated to protect someone smaller than him." Ella didn't look up, but she nodded. That's 'cause he's brave, she said softly, and good. Daniel smiled faintly. Yeah, brave and good. The vet came over, checking the monitors one last time. He's resting peacefully now, she said. You both should too. Daniels nodded, but neither he nor Ella moved. They just stayed there, silent guardians, keeping watch over the one who had guarded them. Outside, rain began to fall, tapping softly against the window. The rhythmic sound mingled with the heartbeat monitor, a gentle lullaby for the wounded dog who had carried too much courage for one day. And though no one said it aloud, the truth filled the room like the faint scent of rain. Rex had saved a child's life, and now it was their turn to save his. Night had fallen by the time they reached the police veterinary wing. The hallways were quiet, too quiet, lit only by the hum of fluorescent lights that painted everything in pale blue. The buzz of electricity mixed with the faint rhythm of breathing machines from the nearby rooms. Rex lay on a steel examination table beneath one of those lights. His fur glistened dully where IV lines and monitoring pads had been placed. The steady beep of a heart monitor filled the silence, soft and rhythmic, a fragile reminder that he was still here. Officer Daniels stood beside him, hands on the edge of the table, head bowed. His uniform jacket hung open, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up. He hadn't moved in hours. His fingers brushed the shepherd's paw, cold, motionless, yet alive. You shouldn't have drunk that, Daniels whispered, voice raw. That wasn't your job. You were supposed to stay safe. I was supposed to protect you. Rex didn't stir. His breathing was shallow, slow, steady, the drug still working its way through his blood. The veterinarian, a middle-aged woman in scrubs, adjusted the drip and checked the monitor. Her tone was calm but careful. His vitals are stable, she said softly. The sedative concentration is dropping. He's fighting it. Daniels nodded faintly, though his jaw clenched. He's been fighting his whole life. The vet placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Then he knows how to win this one, too. But Daniels didn't answer. His gaze stayed fixed on the dog, the same partner who had chased armed suspects through alleyways, tracked lost hikers for miles, stood firm in gunfire without flinching. Seeing him like this, still, fragile, powerless, rate slow, cut deeper than any bullet ever could. The door creaked open behind him. Ella stood there, holding her mother's hand. Her small frame seemed even smaller under the sterile lights. In her other arm, she carried something wrapped in pink, a blanket, soft and handmade, unevenly stitched but full of love. Her mother knelt beside her, whispering, "Remember what you said you wanted to do?" Ella nodded. She took a shaky breath and walked slowly toward the table. Daniels turned when he heard her footsteps. His expression softened instantly, but the sadness in his eyes didn't fade. "Hey, kiddo," he said quietly. "He's strong. He's gonna pull through." Ella's lip trembled. "He looks tired." "He's just resting." Daniels knelt beside her. "He worked real hard today." She nodded, clutching the blanket tighter. Then, standing on tiptoe, she reached up and spread it carefully over Rex's body. The edges draped unevenly over his legs, the fabric covered in small patches of embroidery, paw prints, hearts, and near the corner, a crookedly stitched word, hero. Her small hands smoothed it gently across his chest. "It's warm," she whispered. "I made it for him, in case he ever got cold." Daniels swallowed hard, throat burning. He turned away, pretending to study the monitor so she wouldn't see his eyes. Rex's ear twitched faintly under the blanket. It was barely perceptible, but Ella noticed. "See?" she said quickly, voice breaking. "He moved! He knows I'm here!" The vet smiled softly. "He can hear you. Keep talking to him, that helps." So she did. Time 400 mom. For the next few minutes, the sterile room became something else entirely. Ella spoke in a trembling, earnest voice. About school, about the drawing she made of him catching the bad guy. About how she didn't like the way everyone looked scared in court except him. Daniels listened, motionless. Each word landed heavier than the last. "I was really scared," Ella said finally, voice cracking. "But then you looked at me, Rex, and I wasn't scared anymore." She leaned forward, pressing her forehead against his fur. "You're my best friend." That broke him. Daniels turned away, hand covering his mouth, shoulders shaking. The sound of quiet sobbing, muffled, restrained, filled the space. Her mother stepped forward but stopped herself. This wasn't a moment to interrupt. Rex's chest rose, slow but steady. His body remained still, but his tail shifted once beneath the blanket. A faint movement, almost invisible, but enough to make Ella gasp softly. "See?" she said again, tears spilling freely. "He heard me!" Daniels exhaled shakily, forcing a smile. "He hears you all right. Probably thinking you talk more than the rest of us put together." That made her giggle through her tears. A small, watery sound that somehow felt sacred in the middle of all this grief. The vet adjusted the monitor again, studying the new readings. "His body's responding," she said quietly. "The sedative's almost gone, but he's exhausted. He'll need rest, fluids, and time. He's lucky you brought him in when you did." Minutes passed. The room dimmed as one of the overhead lights flickered off. Daniels stood silently, arms folded, watching the two of them, a little girl and a wounded hero, bound by something purer than duty or words. He finally spoke, voice low and steady, rate slow, as if confessing to the room itself. "He's the best partner I ever had," he said, "and he never once hesitated to protect someone smaller than him." Ella didn't look up, but she nodded. "That's 'cause he's brave," she said softly, "and good." Daniel smiled faintly. "Yeah, brave and good." The vet came over, checking the monitors one last time. "He's resting peacefully now," she said. "You both should, too." Daniels nodded, but neither he nor Ella moved. They just stayed there, silent guardians, keeping watch over the one who had guarded them. Outside, rain began to fall, tapping softly against the window. The rhythmic sound mingled with the heartbeat monitor, a gentle lullaby for the wounded dog who had carried too much courage for one day. And though no one said it aloud, the truth filled the room like the faint scent of rain. Rex had saved a child's life, and now it was their turn to save his. A year can change everything, and yet some things stay exactly as they were. The city had returned to its rhythm. The courthouse, once filled with chaos and cameras, now echoed only with the sound of normal trials, the hum of routine. The storm had passed. The world had moved on. But in a quiet corner of the K-9 training grounds, life carried a different kind of peace. Officer Daniels stood beneath a wide oak tree, his whistle resting against his lips as he watched the new recruits run their drills. Young handlers and eager dogs worked in pairs across the dusty field, Commands called, paws pounding, praise shouted. It was the same program he'd run for years, yet every time he looked at the field, one sight stood apart from the rest. Rex. The German shepherd sat at the edge of the course, his fur now a little grayer around the muzzle, his posture proud as ever. He didn't run the obstacles anymore. The vet had said his reflexes had slowed, that his joints needed rest. But Rex didn't seem to mind. He simply watched, his gaze following each young dog like a silent teacher, ears twitching every time one barked in excitement or confusion. Daniels smiled faintly. "Still judging their form, huh?" he murmured. Rex's tail thumped once in reply. The officer crouched beside him, brushing his hand along the shepherd's back. "Don't worry, partner. You've already set the bar too high for the rest of us." A warm wind swept across the field, carrying the scent of grass and earth. The recruits kept working, their laughter echoing faintly in the distance. Daniels's eyes drifted toward the training building, where a framed newspaper article hung near the entrance. The headline still gleamed in bold black letters. "Police dog exposes courtroom poison plot. Hero saves child. Witness." Underneath it, a photo of Rex sat beside a smiling Ella, the little girl clutching his paw for the camera. The day the paper had run the story, Daniels remembered thinking how strange it felt, seeing truth captured in ink when the real miracle had happened in silence. He rose, brushing dust off his knees, and looked toward the horizon. His voice was quiet, reflective, a thought spoken half to himself, half to the dog at his side. "Some heroes never speak," he said. "They just act." Rex looked up at him, head tilted slightly, as if understanding the weight of those words. Daniels chuckled softly. "You don't need speeches anyway. You've said more without words than most of us do in a lifetime." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, dented water bottle, the kind he carried everywhere now, more out of habit than thirst. The moment the light glinted off the metal surface, Rex's ears perked. His body stiffened just slightly, alert, remembering. Daniels noticed and smiled. "You remember, don't you?" The dog blinked, then looked away as if embarrassed, tail sweeping once in the grass. "Yeah," Daniels said softly, twisting the cap open. "Me too." He poured a small stream of water onto the ground, letting it soak into the soil. The act was symbolic, a quiet nod to what had once almost gone wrong and what had been made right. Footsteps sounded behind him. He turned to see Ella running across the field, her long hair bouncing, her backpack thumping against her back. She had grown taller, still small, still bright-eyed, but more confident now. "Officer Daniels?" she called, out of breath but smiling. He waved. "Hey, look who's skipping school to see an old dog." "I'm not skipping," she laughed. "Mom said it's educational." Rex perked up at the sound of her voice. His tail began to wag, slow at first, then faster, thumping against the ground. Ella knelt beside him, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Hi, boy," she whispered into his fur. "I missed you." Rex licked her cheek once, making her giggle. Daniels folded his arms, watching them. "He's been waiting for you, you know. Pretends he doesn't care. But the minute someone says your name, he starts looking at the door." Ella smiled proudly. "That's 'cause we're friends." She pulled a folded piece of paper from her bag, a drawing, hand-colored with crayons. It showed Rex sitting tall beside her, in front of a big building, that looked suspiciously like the courthouse, though she'd drawn the sun smiling above it. Across the top, in uneven letters, she'd written, "My hero." She held it up shyly. "I made this for the station wall, so people remember him." Daniels took the drawing gently, his throat tightening again. "That's perfect," he said. "I think we've got the exact spot for it, right next to the headline." He nodded toward the article on the wall, and Ella's face lit up. "Really? Really?" Rex gave a small bark, almost as if agreeing. Ella laughed, hugging him again. "See? He likes the idea." Daniels smiled. "Kind?" She tilted her head. "Exactly." Rex let out a small huff, lying, down in the shade, his front paws crossed. Ella leaned against his side. Sketchbook open now, starting another drawing. Daniels stood nearby, watching the recruits run drills, barking commands, laughter spilling into the air. And for the first time in a long while, he felt the world was right again. The camera of the moment, if life had one, would have panned slowly outward. Ella coloring beside her best friend, Rex's fur glowing warm in the sunlight. Daniels standing tall, proud, with the framed newspaper gleaming behind him. A breeze passing over the grass, stirring the flags overhead. And faintly, in the air, the echo of Daniels's earlier words lingered. "Some heroes never speak, they just act." The light faded softly as the day went on. Rex watched the sky for a long time, as if listening to something only he could hear. When Ella laughed, that pure, unguarded sound, his tail wagged again. It was a good day, a peaceful day. The kind of day a hero earns. Time is a quiet thief. It doesn't shout or steal suddenly. It just fades things, one sunrise at a time. Years had softened the world since the day the courtroom gasped for breath and a German shepherd saved a little girl's truth. The headlines had yellowed, the medals had dulled with dust, but the bond between Rex, Daniels, and Ella never faded. The shepherd's once black coat was now streaked with silver. His gait slower, his movements more deliberate, but his eyes still burned with that same quiet fire. He had earned his retirement with honor. Every officer in the K9 unit knew the name, Rex. His kennel wasn't just a space, it was a shrine of loyalty. On most afternoons, he could be found lying near the open window of Daniels's small office, sunlight spilling across his fur. The sound of papers rustling, radios crackling, all background music to the slow, steady rhythm of his breathing. Daniels had grown older, too. His hair thinner, his hands rougher. But his eyes, when they looked at Rex, still softened, just like they always had. "You're still keeping everyone in line, huh?" Daniels murmured, scratching behind the old dog's ear. Rex blinked slowly, tail wagging just once. The door opened, and a voice, brighter, lighter, filled the room. "Hi, Officer Daniels." Ella, now a teenager, stood there with her backpack slung over one shoulder. Her smile was the same, though her eyes had deepened, wiser, steadier, touched by time and memory. She knelt beside Rex, fingers tracing the graying fur around his muzzle. "Hey, boy," she whispered. "You're still handsome." Rex leaned into her touch, letting out a soft sigh that almost sounded like contentment. Daniels leaned back in his chair, arms folded, watching with quiet pride. "He waits for you every Thursday," he said. "Like he's got your schedule memorized." Ella smiled. "Then I'll never be late." The months passed like the turning of a slow, tender page. Seasons shifted, Leaves fell, bloomed again, fell once more. Rex's movements grew slower, his naps longer. The station built a new training wing. Daniels mostly supervised from a desk now, but every morning he still stopped by Rex's side before the day began, whispering the same thing he had for years. "Morning, partner." And Rex always blinked, wagged his tail once, as if to say, "Still here." But even the bravest hearts grow tired. One evening, as the sky bruised with sunset and the world hushed under a wash of orange and gold, Daniels noticed something different. Rex wasn't by the window. He was lying quietly in his corner, eyes half open, chest rising slowly. There was no pain, only peace, as if he had simply decided it was time to rest. Daniels knelt beside him, voice breaking in a way it hadn't in years. Hey, buddy. You've done enough," he whispered. "You've saved enough. You don't have to fight anymore." Footsteps echoed, quick, urgent. Ella appeared in the doorway, eyes wide. "Rex?" Daniels looked up. He's tired, sweetheart." She crossed the room, dropped to her knees. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "He's just resting." Her hands moved over his fur, smoothing it gently, the same way she had all those years ago in the vet's room. Rex's eyes flickered, focusing on her for a brief, shining moment. He seemed to recognize her, to remember everything: the courtroom, the blanket, the laughter, the love. "Hey," Ella said softly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "It's okay, boy. You can sleep now." Rex's breathing slowed even more. Daniel's fingers tightened around his paw. "Rest easy, partner," he whispered. "You've earned it." The heartbeat monitor, faint and gentle, beeped once, then again, then faded into silence. The world seemed to hold its breath. Ella bowed her head, shoulders shaking. Tears fell silently onto Rex's fur. Daniel sat still for a long moment, his hand resting on the dog's paw, unwilling to move. He'd said goodbye to partners before, but none of them had felt like this. The light through the window dimmed to twilight. For a long moment, they stood there, two lives forever marked by the loyalty of one dog who had given everything without asking for anything in return. And as the scene faded into quiet stillness, a single voice, calm, reflective, timeless, seemed to echo through it all. Sometimes, truth doesn't come from words. It comes from the heart that refuses to look away. The screen fades to black. No music at first, just silence. Then slowly, a soft instrumental melody rises, carrying the weight of everything that was lost and everything that will never be forgotten. End credits tone. Hope, gratitude, eternal loyalty. When we open our hearts to an animal, we don't just gain a pet. We find a companion who teaches us what words can't. German Shepherds remind us of loyalty in its purest form: quiet, steadfast, and unwavering. They don't judge. They don't ask for much. Just our time, our patience, and our love. Stories like Rex's remind us that the bond between humans and dogs isn't built on training alone. It's built on trust. Every wag of the tail, every look in their eyes is a conversation about love, honesty, and courage. The kind of truths we sometimes forget in our busy world. Because at the end of the day, loving a dog isn't about commands or tricks. It's about sharing a life, quietly and faithfully, with a soul that already loves you back.